Each morning we are born again. What we did today is what matters the most. Hello dear listeners. I welcome you all in the second season of the podcast, The Wellbeing. In our bi-monthly releases of our episodes, we aspire to connect with guests from all over the world and talk about the most important topic there ever is, which is our well-being. Although I recommend you to listen to the episodes by clicking on the link that I share on my Facebook page or by visiting Anchor at www.anchor.fm/Neutron. We have also uploaded all the episodes on my YouTube channel, Sandeep Neutron. Today I have a very special guest joining in from East Coast, United States. We have Sophie Herbert Slater. Without any delay, I'd love to welcome her in the show. Sophie, thank you so much for accepting the offer, despite your busy schedule, accepting to talk with us. Thank you for showing support to my interviewer. How are you? Welcome to the podcast, Sophie.
Hi, Sandeep. Thank you so much for having me today. I think it's so wonderful that we're speaking. We're half a world apart, and I hear you so clearly. And it's a real honor to partake in the podcast. I love the mission about helping people live with more mindfulness and awareness, which I think we're really tested in these times of COVID. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. One of the reasons you came to my mind right off the bat was I think you had been I don't know the exact date, but from I think we had spoken after a decade, right, Sophie?
It's been quite a while. I mean, we've been in touch online, but we met 10 years ago in New York City. I can't believe it's been that long.
Yes. And I'm known you as correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody who always cherishes mindfulness, healthy living, conscious living, and you're also a great yoga instructor. How do I say yoga practitioner yourself? You've been to India before. Can you tell us a little bit about your trip to India first, and then how about you also include something about yourself, a little background about yourself?
Absolutely. So I have been to India 11 times and Nepal one time. We went there on our honeymoon in 2013. But I started going to India when I was in college at the Cooper Union School of Art, so I was a fine arts major, specializing mainly in what ended up being documentary photography. And I had some time, I was studying abroad in Paris when I one day was like, I want to go to India. So I was living in Paris, saved up to buy a ticket, and went to India for about a month, where I traveled first up to Dharamsala and decided to teach English to Tibetan refugees as a volunteer. So I did that, and then also had my introduction to meditation at the Tushita Institute in Dharamsala. And that was just really life-changing for me. I ended up traveling down by myself to Mumbai eventually, where I kind of volunteered at an orphanage in Jaipur along the way, and then at the Mother Teresa House in the suburbs of Mumbai for children with physical handicaps and also mental handicaps. And I decided to take the semester off from my school and return from college and return to India for about 3 months. So I did that, brought my mother, went back to Dharamsala, also visited Ladakh before that. My mom came for about 2 weeks, which was wonderful. We had a great time. And then I began really pursuing yoga a lot more, and then eventually continued to return, did my teacher trainings in Maharashtra, outside of Nashik. And that the biggest change that kept me coming back to India was when I after completing my teacher trainings, went down to South India and Karnataka, and went to go volunteer at a wonderful place called the Dinabandhu Trust Children's Home, which is about 2 hours from Mysore in Chamarajanagar. And it's a fabulous organization that helps orphans and destitute children. So many of the children have a parent who is maybe unable to provide for them because of circumstance. And that place has changed my life. I'm still in touch with the children, but I just kept going back every year, 2 weeks. And then after I had my son, my first son in 2015, it became a little harder to go back. We almost went back in 2017, but there was a big dengue fever outbreak, and we just, with the baby, it was a little, we couldn't do it at that point. So I can't wait to get my kids back to India post-COVID. I can't wait to go to the village, and I'm still in touch with them really regularly, which is just fabulous. So that's kind of my history with India.
Absolutely. Yoga. Congratulations on being the mother.
Thank you. Thank you.
2 amazing kids, right?
Yeah, 2 boys. They keep me busy.
You were already gravitated towards the life of service from a very young age, right? How old were you when? Because that's incredible. How old were you when you first felt that you need to somehow contribute?
That's a great. That's a great question. This really was a huge turning point. I was always brought up with wonderful parents who were and my grandmother lived with us, and they were always about giving and sharing and volunteering. But I went to India for the first time when I was 20. I actually turned 21 there, and in Jaipur, and I was at the SOS Children's home in Jaipur, just volunteering for the week. And what changed for me is, I was in the New York City, this art school, and I art is such an amazing thing. But I felt that I could really use what I was doing instead to help others, where before I think it was more an internal process. It was more introspective, self-expressive, which is so important, don't get me wrong, but I looked at the world differently after that first trip. And that's when I really kind of went on. I was doing all this documentary photography, and my my senior thesis was actually a fundraiser for about 4 different nonprofits in India. It was a photographic show representing these places, and then also worked as a fundraiser. And I would play music. I was a singer-songwriter too at the time. I'd play guitar and I sing, and I would go and do gigs and raise money and donate all the tips. So that was really the turning point. And then when I was in my 20s, however I could give, I taught yoga for Pathways to Housing, which is a housing first model for homeless in New York City. They believe in providing a home to help individuals who are homeless actually get the necessities they need to change their lives. That's a whole other conversation, but it's a really incredible model that values the human in each and every person. I know when we met, Vikas Khanna introduced me to the New York City Rescue Mission. So I'd go there every week, and I was helping him on his documentary. I don't think that one got finished, but so I try to give. And I think what I've been grieving with COVID is having my 2 young children. When I set off to be a mother, I imagined we would do all these family activities together. We'd go and help the food pantry, and COVID's been challenging because of all the health precautions that we're kind of isolated. It's a really weird feeling.
Yeah, sure. I think this is also there's so many aspects to COVID, right, Sophie? Obviously, there are so many constraints posed by this particular pandemic. Nobody really had predicted it would be this big. Mm-hmm. This is also a reminder of how fragile our life, no matter how advanced technology-wise we are, right? We've been talking across the globe right now, 2 different timings, but still, the life we have on Earth, the time we have in Earth is really, really limited. So we also makes me grateful, I guess. I want to talk a little bit about yoga with you first.
Yeah, sure.
What's your relationship? Like, I understand a little bit about meditation. My brother, he was an avid meditator. He's still an avid meditator. You used to tell me while I was in New York City to meditate, at least give it a shot. It took me a long time to finally, try the meditation, and eventually I tried another time. I tried, made it into my regular routine, and now I wonder why I hadn't done that years ago.
Isn't that interesting?
That changed my life. It plays a vital role right now in my life. But I don't understand yoga.
Yeah.
You've been a yoga practitioner, right? Really, really good at it, right? Talk to us.
I feel very grateful to have the opportunity to have amazing teachers over the years and to have taught a lot. And I loved, I think most important with yoga, it's never, sorry about my baby in the background, you might hear that. It's really just about doing.
He's welcome in the show.
You'll definitely probably hear him.
Absolutely. All of us are gonna love him.
Yeah, he's super sweet, and that's my 2-year-old. I have a 2 and a 5-year-old, and
that could be his first episode too in the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. His first public appearance. So I think what I would really like to say with yoga, it is never good or bad, but it's really just about doing. And also having empathy that sometimes the yoga, there's so many different types of yoga. There's karma yoga, which is the yoga of giving, right? Giving without the expectation of receiving merit or something in return. And there's yogasana, which is the postures that we do, that increase our fitness and our flexibility and our strength. And there's, meditation and mindfulness. So being a parent, and I hope this maybe resonates with other parents listening, especially like mothers of very young children, where it's such a physically beautiful and demanding job too. My practice has changed and evolved and adapted. And there's some days when simply getting on my yoga mat for 10 minutes or breathing is the major yoga, right? So it's about yoga, I would say, is about adaptability. It is about discipline, but it's also about kindness to yourself, which is essential for kindness to others. So over the years, as I mentioned, I did study in India and with some wonderful teachers in New York and different methods. I've done a lot of Ashtanga and Vinyasa and Iyengar and Hatha yoga. And my approach as a teacher is very eclectic. I've also done a lot of gentle yoga classes. My thesis when I went for my graduate degree in art therapy and counseling, because I kind of wanted to take my work off the yoga mat more and have the ability to work with different populations in a different capacity and focus more on mental health and well-being, which was why I went back and took about 4 years because I was part-time with my kids, and I went back and I got this master's degree in art therapy and counseling. But my thesis was on, for example, the role that art therapy can play and yoga as well in reducing anxiety in pregnant mothers, in both first-time mothers and second, third-time mothers. So I feel like yoga is there's so many facets to it. There's so many things that it can be, but the one message is always the same, and I think it's the same with meditation. It's being present. It is allowing yourself to feel in the moment. And I think what that does, as challenging, as intimidating as that can be sometimes, we all say some people say I have so many monkeys in my mind, I can't sit with them. But it's about being kind and looking inward and realizing that in this moment, I am okay, right? In this moment, I'm here and I'm safe and I am present. So, yeah, in a nutshell.
Yeah. So what best way to approach maybe find a teacher, or how would you recommend it for even people like me who I'm really I think I'm also attracted to yoga and things like that, but like me, I'm sure there are a lot of people who wants to get into it.
Yeah.
They don't know like how to get into it, you know.
Oh my gosh, right? Like, what do I do?
I read in one of the posts that yoga are not merely exercise, right?
Yeah.
It's more like a union of mind and body.
And that's what the word means. The word yoga means that, a union of mind and body and soul. So to start, I mean, now we live in this exceptional time with all this virtual business, which is for better or for worse. But I am very grateful that all these yoga studios have been able to stay afloat because they're able to offer virtual programs. And pre-COVID, I would say, if you can go to a class and go to a beginner's class, that is the best way to jump in because you'll feel community and you'll be learning the postures with the seasoned eye of a teacher. But now there's so many different options. I would say join a studio. So many people probably have studios and start with something gentle. And gentle, I think there's a misperception that gentle yoga is not like a good thing. I feel sometimes a gentle class is harder than something with more advanced, faster movement because we're really forced to be with ourselves and we can get into muscles that we haven't allowed ourselves to feel for so long and work with our breath.
In terms of learning yoga, like how did you learn, Sophie? Was it in India? Did you find a teacher in India or what was your
good question.
learning process?
So I first was introduced when I was in high school, and I didn't really do much yoga in high school. It was just a little bit. I remember my aunt was really into yoga, and we went to this class together. I was like, wow, this is cool. Wow. And then in college, there was a yoga teacher who had come to Cooper Union. Her name was Tuesday. She didn't, I don't know, I think she moved to California, but she was a great teacher. She didn't teach on Tuesday. I think it was like Wednesday. And I just remember that after one or two classes, I was like, this is amazing. Like, I feel really, I just feel so present and again, like safe within myself and calm within myself. And then when I went to India, or when I went to Paris, I started practicing regularly when I was studying abroad there. And I was going to two very different places, a Shivananda yoga center, which is where I was like, I'm going to go to India and go on a trip. I had that realization. And I also got really into Bikram yoga, which was, I think hot yoga is great if you want to do it. I felt like for me, that maybe wasn't the best choice at that time. But those were kind of my introductions. And then when I moved to India the second time, I got very into more Ashtanga practice. And I was a student. So when I came back to New York, one of the ways that I could afford to do yoga was kind of going to all these different studios and trying them out because I could kind of take advantage of these new specials. I'm sorry, studio owners. I was like young and I didn't have any money to kind of pay for a regular class all the time. So that kept me afloat for about half a year in New York. And then I did a lot of self-practice. So I would say try different methods, right? Don't just like if you find one really that resonates with you and that's what you want to stick with, then that's great. But something I kind of do struggle with in the yoga world was when I was in New York City, there was sometimes kind of like a competition between the different methods of yoga, and that seems counterintuitive, right? So yeah, be open and try everything from Kundalini to Shivananda and see what works with you.
Wow.
Yeah, and be open-minded.
Same thing with the meditation, right? Like I thought meditation was just sitting down and closing my eyes, right? That's what I thought in the beginning. In my first meditation for 10 days Vipassana, that's what I think that's what I did. After completing 10 days, I really didn't have any revelation. It was like a short vacation for me. I had like a lot of back pains and backaches.
I remember that when I did it. Yeah.
But the second time was different.
Yeah.
Right? Second time, like when I started getting like really inside that mind, and at one point, like it was a moment where like I really had to find my body. I was looking for my body, and I was getting emotional, and I think I might have cried.
Wow.
And that's when I realized this is more than sitting down. This is something serious.
Yeah. So your question was about like fear of hurting yourself, and you mentioned that when we had those moments, if you hadn't had a teacher, you would have been like overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and that is something that when I mentioned about like kind of all the virtual yoga now, I would emphasize more than anything, start with gentle. And if you're doing a gentle class meant for beginners, you should be in a very safe space. What I get worried about, if we're just talking about physical body, is when people kind of force themselves into a posture prematurely. Like, for example, I have over the years had a pretty advanced asana practice, but I wouldn't say that that's like good yoga. It's just I did a lot of yoga and I'm pretty flexible. But there's poses right now, because after 2 kids and after, not being as in that physical of a practice, like I wouldn't even attempt to do those postures right now because I would be afraid of like busting a hamstring. So always go within your limit. And I would always tell my students that if you're in a posture and you can't breathe calmly, and if anything more deeply than you would normally breathe, then that's a suggestion that it's time to back up a little bit. You're gone a little too deep. So when we do poses, you're not looking to get our heart rate up. It's actually the opposite of aerobic exercise. It's allowing, I would always say, like, let the breath be like if you're sewing by hand, right? Or you can just imagine somebody sewing by hand and you have a needle moving back and forth. The more advanced the poses get, if anything, you want that stitch to stay the same length or maybe even get longer, right? So even if you're doing something like sun salutations that are moving and your heart rate might go up a little bit because it's a little more rigorous, but that breath should continue to just be so steady and swinging and an even slowing stitch. So if you can keep with that and remember that almost as a mantra, like my breath is calm, you should kind of safeguard against injury. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. So now that we're talking about it, I have one personal curiosity I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I'm not planning this, but what do you think? Meditation and yoga, right? Or they do you think one should practice both, or one is sufficient, or what do you think? What's your opinion on it?
I think they're perfect complements. And actually, yoga originally was intended to prime the body for meditation, right? Because if we're fit, because of our body, we're doing the yoga, the postures, we'll be able to sit longer. And we'll be able to sustain our meditation further because our back is supple and our hips are supple, right? So they are, I believe, and I think if you look at the history of yoga, completely intertwined. That being said, if you can only do one of those right now, that's awesome. Right? So I think people can feel overwhelmed, like I need to do it all. But no, anything, even if your meditation is walking consciously or brushing your teeth, like I love Thich Nhat Hanh and his perspective. It's like bringing mindfulness into everyday gestures, because it's absolutely shocking, I find in my own life, how unmindful I am, even as maybe a mindful person. It's very humbling.
Yeah, Sadhguru, like I've been reading his book now, The Inner Engineering. I just started reading it. And I think he's a big yoga teacher. And he mentions one of his social media posts somewhere. I found that his wife died while doing the yoga because...
Really?
Yeah, things like that. I guess we can talk about this in another episode, but...
I know. I'm like, this has to be continued. It's a cliffhanger.
And then, how the misunderstanding sometimes could pollute one's mind, And so that was one thing.
Well,
yes, go ahead.
I just, I don't need to keep in check being like overly dogmatic to any one thing. And that's what I think as a human being and as a witness of the world and of myself. And I think that because a lot of yoga is about observing, right? And observing ourselves so we can also better observe the world around us. But there is a lot of dogma in some of the yoga world. And I'm not talking specifically about what you're the teacher talk, because I'm not familiar with that. But I think it is also like making sure that we're not overly dogmatic in whatever we do and when we step into something, and being empathetic. And this is not just yoga. I mean, this is religion. This is every world belief. It's always, there's that line between loving, acceptance, understanding, and empathy, and where it can become rigid and dogmatic.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I need to, I guess we can talk about yoga all day. Yeah, I'll find a time to sort of ask you some questions personally, perhaps, and maybe share with my listeners later on. Let me get back to the subject topic. I'm planning to ask you a few questions here. Sophie, would you be able to share some of your earliest childhood memories? And how did I shape you as a person to become a person today?
Wow, great questions. I love that.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up to that after that.
Sure. So, and I think it's great. I think it's all about the whole person, right? So, I think for me, some of the earliest, if we're going to go way back, my dad died when I was a baby, so I was 1.5, and he had a very abrupt cancer, and he passed away in 5 months. And so my mom was an amazing woman. She was a single mom, but I think I always grew up with death on the periphery of my awareness. And I think that also what happens sometimes when you lose someone when you're so young, or something happens, maybe your parents get divorced or whatever, it's easy to minimize the impact of that and say, oh, I was so little, like it's okay, right? I don't remember, it's okay. But the more that I live, and the more that I also do my own work in therapy and yoga, and the more that I read, I'm so aware that, and also as a mother, right, that so much of our predisposition of how we attach to others in the world are based upon the first 2 years of our life. And this time that maybe we're minimally verbal towards the end of it, but the energy that we're exposed to during that time is so important. So I believe having that experience early on definitely made me kind of want to seek out healing practices perhaps a little more. I know it heavily influenced my art when I was doing a lot of art, and it's something that I still process to this day. I notice that when I get stuck, I have a wonderful sacral practitioner I work with. She's like, you kind of have to imagine your 1.5 self. And when you and your husband have like an argument or you have a disagreement, your trigger point, if you think about it or just acknowledge, it could be that 1.5-year-old person. So I think that that was, even though I had a wonderful childhood and I have a wonderful second dad, my mom got remarried when I was 6, that was a very pivotal experience in my life, and something as a mother I've also been forced to process in new ways.
Yeah. So do you my follow-up question to childhood is rather, if you will share with us one of your challenges in life and how you overcome it, or did you ever overcome it? If you did, what you did about it? Do you consider your childhood, the whole period, because of that tragedy, you consider that to be that challenge, or is there any other particular challenges, if you would, or comfortable, if you could share with us?
Sure, I love these are good deep questions. I think that did create some unique challenges with how I had, my feelings of attachment. But I do feel like I keep them in check, and it's helped me evolve very much. But I would say the biggest challenge, and here my little baby that I have right here, the biggest challenge that I have right now is that, I have a degree of anxiety. I think that's not unique, and I think that much of my 30s has been acknowledging and letting myself actually admit that I have anxiety around certain things. And I have a lot of anxiety around the environment. As a mother, having 2 kids, I have, they actually now have a phrase, eco-anxiety. It's not quite in the DSM yet, but it is, I think, hopefully soon, people like me who really have anxiety because of our fear of catastrophic climate change. So that's something I deal with every day. And to counter that, I really make an effort to try to conserve resources. We grow a lot of our own food. We have a huge garden when it's warm, and even in the house now, I have like nice little sprouts going on. We compost. We try to minimize our fuel emissions, and to answer your question, that's probably the biggest, most pressing thing. And I'm hoping that the new era that we just entered into politically will help create some positive change, because I can't.
Sure.
A lot of my anxiety I came face to face with after 2016. So, but that's another conversation we don't even have to have.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Because the podcast is about the well-being, so I think it is very important for us we value well-being, I guess, when we know we are not 100%, right?
Yeah.
It could be, or like the realization of something bad could happen, and then the anxiety, and then there are so many things we are all troubled with.
Yeah, exactly.
And so many of those things are, I think so many are also created by our mind. Right?
Totally.
And then as we grow older, we have our childhood, and we have this rosy imagination of how things are gonna be for us growing up. And then we realize things are not as rosy or as beautiful as we thought it would be. And we're faced to ask this question to ourselves: what's the most important thing in our life, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, at one point they ask this question. Do you think it is important to sort of ask this kind of question to oneself?
Oh, totally.
If so, what do you think is the most important thing for people, for human beings, and at least from your personal experience?
Yeah. Well, I think like what comes to mind, and I'm reminded of, so at the orphanage Jayadev, if I have one yoga teacher, for me, in my mind, it's the founder of the orphanage, which is funny because we would laugh that I would teach him yoga postures, but he taught me way more about life. And he said once, I think this was around the time like Dan and I went there, and I brought Dan for the first time on our honeymoon, and Dan said, Jayadev said, it's the human connections that matter most. And I really feel that so much, especially as a mother. I actually lost my mother in 2014. She had an aneurysm, and she died very suddenly. And I'm just so grateful. Yeah, thank you. I'm just so grateful that we really had a relationship based on connection and honesty. And there was nothing that wasn't said. So I had no regrets that there was something I didn't say to her. I had the ability to communicate, because I think if we communicate openly from our heart, and we do it with a sense of honesty, and we show compassion, and we don't hold back, and we don't, if we have a disagreement with somebody, we don't let that fester and harbor, but we try to clear the air soon. I think if we can look at, in her experience, her passing made me realize that, like, if we treat everybody in the present moment, like this could be the last moment we see them, then we honor that human connection. Yeah. And am I perfect at doing that? No. Not as a wife always. It's always, not always as a mother, but I try to come back to that as soon as I realize, like, hey, like, let's fix this. If we just had a disagreement, you know, we have a great marriage, I think, because of that, but it's every marriage, you're going to have your things, right? Or, you know, your kid is going to upset you, and you're going to have your moment, have to give them a timeout, and then, like, you have to discipline them, and then you're like, okay, now we have to come back and we reset. So I think it is human connection, and if we can keep our own mind healthy and our own body healthy, it's going to help us maintain those relationships.
Yeah, like is not the right word, but I really agree with you 100%. And we, in terms of disagreement and human interactions, there are times when we may not like what other person is doing.
Yeah.
But I see it not as I see it in a way like there's a deeper us, like every single human being, every single beings are connected by a deeper self, right? Deeper whatever the thing is, and then there is our mind, and sometimes there could be another individual not acting the way which is acceptable to us or in the society, things like that. But we need to take that into account because we live in this world. But I guess we can't take it too seriously, right? We need to understand deep down in our heart, deep down in our soul, that he or she is the same. Everybody is connected with that fabric. But that doesn't mean we do not. We still have to live in this world. So there are also repercussions, but the repercussions also come through kindness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's compassion, there's kindness, not the opposite.
Yeah,
so I love this.
I agree. And if the world had more of that, if we could stay in touch with that, then it's amazing how much peace would result.
Sure, yeah. At least it makes us peaceful. Like I've realized in my life too, like there are people we come across every day during our work, study, whatever the thing we may or may not be doing. I have to hold back and I have to teach myself. I catch myself not liking somebody. Like, what am I doing? I'll be like, okay, I can still tell that person to behave or not behave. I can still have the punishment or reward in the place, but whatever I do, it should come from a place of sincerity and love and compassion rather than ill will or hatred, right?
Exactly.
That has really changed the relationship, and the more I practice it, the more I try to in daily lives, I think the more peaceful I become and the more meaningful the relationship are.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's the more that we practice too, the more we can, I like to think of it as recovery, right? The more we can recover back to that aspirational self or that intentionality that we're trying to bring into our life. But there's going to be times when we stray from that because we're human, and we're going to do it more than others, and that's totally what life is. I mean, it would be really boring if we didn't do that. What would you have to work for if we didn't have to work on improving ourselves and not doing our best often, because it'd be like, wait, you'd be perfect. Why would you do anything? I think it is, and I think that I think a lot of Buddhism is so rooted in this idea of embracing the fact that suffering is the human condition, and we're gonna feel that sometimes. We're gonna cause our own suffering often. A lot of our pain is self-chosen, in the words of the prophet, and it's looking at ourselves in a kind way and understanding oh, okay, what did I do there? What could I do a little differently? What can I do to kind of just lean into the reality of this a little more, and be prepared better in the future?
I don't know how to frame this now. what should be the life then? What do you think? What should be the life? Be here, do your best, and what do you think?
I like that. That's good. I think, try to remember the present moment, but to look beyond ourselves. So a combination of mindfulness, which is looking in, but also try to look beyond and help and have empathy and have a sense of caring for others. This year I was also kind of coming back to the triple gates, which is like when I speak and when I think or when I write, especially with social media, which is so radically altering our society, like go through that triple filter of, is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? And if we can just bring a little more of that in our everyday lives, we can really open up so much space. And for those that have more to share and to give and to teach our children to do the same, because that is so important. And I feel like we are going to raise a more empathetic generation coming up. And I'm really committed to trying to help do that with my own kids.
Yeah. I have a final, it's like a tradition of our podcast.
Sure.
I have a final question, but I want to ask you, like, take away from this deeper searching for purpose, meaning sort of, right? Vibe. Let me ask you a little more lightweight question. Or I want to know how was your trip? How was your trip in Nepal? We've been recording from Nepal. I think our listeners would be happy to sort of, hear from you. Like, when was it? What do you thought about Nepal? It's a different world. What do you thought about India versus Nepal in terms of and Nepal in itself? What you liked about it, what you didn't like.
I love Nepal. It was so great. We went in 2013, and it was actually our honeymoon, and we flew into Kathmandu. I mean, very loud city, which was like fun. I love that. I love the architecture is amazing. The people are so kind. The food is delicious.
That was before earthquake.
It was before the earthquake, yeah. So. Which is so heartbreaking that I know that some of the monuments that we had, the upper temples that we saw, were decimated. And I cried when I heard about the earthquake, especially because we also made dear friends, and they were all fine. But our guide, we did about a week on the Everest Trail. So we went up to about 14,000 feet, like right above the tree line, and then we went back because we only had a week to spend and we didn't have the equipment to go any farther. But he was actually at base camp during the earthquake, and he was fine. He had a concussion, but like he was there, and we're still in touch to this day. We helped him out with COVID because it's so hard. He wasn't able to do his work all of a sudden. So I can't wait till we eventually can go back. I'd love to bring my kids there hiking when they're old enough, and go trekking rather. And it was wonderful. It was so beautiful, and the people are so kind. So we felt like it was open arms, and the connections we had. Ironically, my aunt has a bunch of Sherpas who work with her on her property and like manage the farm. So we connected with my friend Cheering, who's lived in the States for a long time, but he put me in touch with his cousin, and his cousin put me in touch with our guide Pemba, and that's kind of it was really nice. So can't wait to go back.
How long was your trip?
In Nepal, it was like a little over a week only, and then we were in India for maybe 10 days.
In this episode, there's a last question for you.
Yes.
Is for our listeners, if you could.
Right here, buddy. Sorry.
Okay, Felix, almost there. Okay. If there is one thing you really want our listeners to get into, and one thing you want them to get out of, from your point of view, what would they be?
I think it would be to remember our ability to be present, but also to remember our ability to love, and the fact that we are loved, And if we can stay connected to that, a lot of mindfulness comes, and a lot of just connectedness can come. And if you want to try yoga, I would say go for it. And feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure you can share a link if you have questions. That's what I would say.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sophie, thank you so much for being in the show. Anything you want to say to our listeners? I think.
No, thank you so much, Sandeep. And I wish you all well and stay safe. And feel free, if you have any questions, reach out. And I'm so excited about your podcast. I can't wait to see where it goes. So thank you for having me.